Hello, welcome to 2014. Happy New Year. I'm just going to do something really simple today. We're going back to basics and I want to show you some basic watercolouring with your dye inks. Now you can use any dye inks for this technique, but I'm using the Stampin' Up! Ones, of course. These are the standard classic ink pads, and they are dye ink rather than pigment ink, and that means that this ink is water based and it has great application for watercolouring, okay, which is what we're doing. So I will just quickly take you through some really basic watercolouring steps, and also if you are interested in seeing more and learning how to do this for yourself, I will be running a class on it early in the new year. So please do to check out my blog and the details of that class, and the details are down below in the comments. Okay, so basic watercolouring. You're going to need an ink pad in your choice of colours, obviously, and you're going to need these little guys. Now you can also use just a brush, but I find these so much better because they are basically watercolouring tools ideally. They have a brush end, just like a normal paintbrush, but you unscrew them, and inside in here you just fill with water from the tap, okay, and so you have water in the barrel of your aqua pen. They're called aqua painters or aqua pens sometimes, but in our catalogue they're down as aqua painters. You get two of these if you're buying them, a thicker or a medium tip one and a fine tip one. So you can use them in different situations. The one I'm using right now is a medium one, and I've also got one here that's a fine one, I believe. No. Yep, that's a fine one. Okay, so I actually have to, they're not that different. I have to put them together to see which is thick and which is not. But I'm going to start out with this one. Now, when you're watercolouring, this is keeping it very simple today. We're not going to do anything very exciting. Once you've chosen your colour, you need to think about your paper. So we've got just plain old Whisper White cardstock, and I'm going to use that and show you how to create a wash as a background. And I've also got some watercolour paper here. Now ideally watercolour paper is the preferred paper to use, only because it is more porous and it therefore holds the watercolour, the ink and the water better, and you will get a slightly different effect with that. So I'll show you both though. Okay, so also the other thing to have on hand, if you do have it, is a piece of paper towel so that you can blot your colour. That's usually a good idea. And how I do this, if you squeeze the ink pads, you'll actually feel them make contact with the lid, the actual pad inside with the lid, and then you actually will have ink sitting here from where you squeezed it onto the lid, and you can use that as a palette. Okay, now how much I squeeze this as I'm using it is going to determine how wet the brush actually is when I apply it to the paper. If I'm going for I'm after more detail, then usually it's better to have a bit more dry, but when I'm using a wash I can squeeze it so I can actually start to see the water come out the end and really make it wet. Okay, so I'll just load up my pen, and I'm actually using it sort of on its side so it takes up as much of the colour as possible, straight onto the white, and then we're doing a background or a wash, and we're just going to drag it along. Okay, now I've got a fair bit of water in that, but you should be able to see the wash effect that you get. And if you were trying to create like water as a background, you could actually do something really pretty with that quite quickly. Alright, if I wanted a darker colour, I would probably not get as much water into it. Obviously I could use a darker colour ink pad too, but the more water you have coming out of your pen, the lighter your ink is going to be. So if I wanted to get a darker effect along the top of that wash, a bit more ink, don't squeeze as much water through this time, and you can start to see now I can get grades of colour. Okay, right, so that's if I was trying to create a nice simple wash background. If I was going to do the same thing on a watercolour paper, this is a lot thicker and it will hold the ink much better. I'm just going to give it another squeeze. Squeeze a bit of water through. You can use a wetter brush when you're using watercolour paper because it will take the water. And squeezing out just a little bit, you're going to get a different effect. You can see I ran out of water over this side. I actually really like that. I love it when some of the ink, the brush gets a little bit dry, and then you'll end up with like pieces of paper in the background that aren't coloured. To me, if I was doing a beach scene, that would look like water, like white tips on the white caps on the water. So that actually would work quite well. Okay, and I've squeezed a little bit more here, so I got a bit more water at this side. And see, that could create a beautiful background. I might actually keep that and use it on a card. So I'll pop that to one side. Whoops, I want that to dry. Okay, then of course we want to colour images. Now the ideal, if you're using an image, you want to use a line drawing image. So you'll be looking for stamps like this set here. This is the Storybook Friends set, all these cute little animals. Okay, and I'm just using this little one here with the cat. Okay, he's playing with a ball of wool. And the secret when you're watercolouring is not to try and be precise. Now I know a lot of people struggle with that a little bit because they want things to be perfect, but actually I'm just going to use a tiny bit of colour on there. I'm not going to be precious about where it goes. If I wanted to change colours, obviously I can change pens, or if I wanted to just clean this one, I can just use a piece of scrap paper, push the water through it, and once it runs clear, it's ready to use with a different colour. Okay, so that would be something that I might do. Now I'm going to make my little kitty cat. Whoops, this is the smoky slate colour, so I'm going to squeeze it so it gets onto the lid. Okay, you can see there I've got a nice bit of colour. Now always start with your lightest colour if you're going to be using more than one. Okay, and I'm just going to use the side of my brush. I'm not going to be too precious about that, and I'm just going to colour him in a little bit. Now it's getting a bit wet, so this is when I would blot it on a piece of paper towel, or I can use a different brush, and we go maybe with a dark colour. Now you can see already I've got some darker colour on him. He's almost done really. I don't want to add too much more, but I might make his tail darker, so I'm just going to use a darker ink. This is basic grey. First one I used was smoky slate. Now this is a finer tip, so I can add a little bit more detail. Okay, and I've added his tail there, and a little bit more dark colour up his back. Now by not colouring completely, he looks like he's got like little white paws because I haven't actually tried to colour him too precisely, and that actually looks better. One of the charms of watercolouring is actually what you don't colour. So some of the background bits that you leave white sometimes will look better. Okay, there's my little pussycat. Pretty easy to do that. You can see how simple it is. I've got another one here which is already on a card that I've partially made up. This has got the little bunny rabbit. I'm going to do him in the same colours. I'm going to use smoky slate. So squeeze, and I'm going to use smoky slate on his little body. I'm not trying to be too precise. Okay. I'm going to actually leave his face white because it will stand out more. And I was going to add a darker colour, but you know what, I'm not. I actually quite like it as I've done it. I'm going to leave his tail white, and I'm going to leave his face white, and his little paws are white too. The only thing I might do, I think I'll add some colour to the star, maybe make the star a little yellow star, which would make that stand out a little bit more. Okay, that's how easy it is to watercolour. That's very basically. Obviously, if we were doing a class, we'd go into a few other things you can do with watercolouring, maybe even a bit of resist technique, but that is your basic watercolouring technique. All you'll need is some ink pads. These are only $9.95 each, so they're really reasonably priced, as good as you'll find anywhere for the value and the size of them. The aqua painters are $19.95 for a pack of 2. So it doesn't take very much at all to get started with watercolouring. Then just think about whether or not you just want to be working with Whisper White. I've just used Whisper White on this card and it's worked just fine. Or if you're going to be doing a lot of watercolouring, you may want to consider some watercolour paper, because you will get a different effect with that holds water a little bit more graciously. I hope you enjoyed that today. Just a simple technique for you, and I will be back soon with more. Thank you. Bye.